my brother is of Baptist faith, and I am, of course, Catholic. And some years ago, he divorced his wife, and he met another woman and was looking to remarry. And he called me because he knows I'm Catholic, and he asked me, what does your faith teach you about this? And I said, of course, we do not approve of this. I mean, there are steps if you're Catholic, with annulling and those kinds of things. But he doesn't believe that, and he got married anyway. I did not attend, and he's held a grudge against me since, which is fine. I understand some of this comes with pains in life when you have your faith. A bit of a cross, I might say. But what is the church's teaching on other faiths who do not hold this truth? Are they held to the same account
Thanks.
as we are?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I've got about a minute till the break, so I'm going to do what I can. I may have to carry the question over to the other side. So the doctrine of marriage is a place where the Protestant tradition and the Catholic tradition diverge radically. It was one of the biggest points of contention in the 16th century when the Protestant Reformation came online. And we often think about sola scriptura and sola fide, these Protestant doctrines being the big thing. But socially, probably the most divisive thing in the Reformation was the change in the doctrine of marriage. And there are basically 2 points on which Protestantism departed from Catholic tradition on the nature of marriage. Most importantly, Protestants rejected the doctrine that marriage is a sacrament. They didn't reject the idea that marriage is a divine institution, but they thought it was a divine institution in the same way that, say, civil government is a divine institution. God established civil government for the well-being of society. They thought, well, you established this civil institution called marriage for the well-being of society. So it's divine, and there are principles governing it, but it's not a sacrament. It's not an efficacious means of grace, and it doesn't belong essentially to the Church's constitution in quite the same way that, something like the Eucharist or baptism would. So they denied the sacramentality of the Eucharist. Now, because they denied it was a sacrament, they also denied that the Church had jurisdiction over marriage in the way that the Catholic Church claims. So they really did make it more of an issue of civil religion, of civil law rather than of canonical ecclesiastical law. Uh-huh. The other major difference between Protestants and Catholics on marriage was that Protestants denied that marriage is indissoluble. Now, many of them take a very dim view of divorce in most circumstances, but they all allow for the possibility of divorce genuinely ending the bond of matrimony in a few circumstances. Before the break, I was explaining some of the differences. Protestants reject the doctrine that marriage is a sacrament. They also reject the doctrine that marriage is, in principle, indissoluble. Now, originally, Protestants recognized really only 2 reasons to legitimate divorce. One would be adultery, and the other would be abandonment. And in those instances, they would allow for divorce and subsequent remarriage. And so that was the real point at issue, because Catholics have always recognized that people might desist from conjugal living. Right? A married couple might have irreconcilable differences so severe they couldn't live under the same roof, and they may even have to have recourse to legal protections. And today that would take the form of civil divorce, to protect themselves in case you had an aggressive or abusive spouse, for example. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't, from the Catholic point of view, that doesn't end the bond of a lawful marriage. And so such a person who's lawfully married, validly married, even if they obtain a civil divorce, cannot remarry, because that would be bigamy, right? Mm-hmm. So those are the major differences between Protestants and Catholics. Now, from the Catholic point of view, the fact that you don't acknowledge the sacramentality of marriage does not stop your marriage from being sacramental. So Protestants, putatively, presumptively, can have valid sacramental marriages. And thus, they also would be bound by the obligation not to dissolve those marriages. And if they do seek a civil divorce for some reason, it would be immoral for them to marry a second time. Now, the fact that they don't recognize that doesn't make that not a moral reality. Now, does a person's ignorance of the moral law go to their culpability? Well, sure it does. Sure it does. Of course it does. A person is less culpable for an immoral act if they don't understand that it's immoral, and if there's some serious impediment to their understanding that it's immoral, then they're not as culpable. It doesn't mean the act itself is not harmful. It's sort of like, if I don't know that it's wrong to murder, that doesn't give me a pass to murder. If I kill someone, they're still dead. I mean, something bad has happened. The fact that I may not be as responsible as somebody else doesn't just give me a carte blanche to go out killing people, right? And in the same way, the fact that I don't know that this is wrong doesn't mean that my actions are not still harmful, right? So, but it's not our job, nor is it the church's job, to judge the conscience of such a person. We can state objectively, this is a bad thing to do, but we really leave the judgment of conscience up to God. So, in the public forum, in the public sphere, we can say, yeah, this is not the way you ought to conduct marriages. But in the internal forum of the conscience, then we let God be the judge. And that gives you freedom to love and accept your brother without judgment.
Yeah.
As Christ tells us, don't judge lest you be judged. We can judge a behavior, but we don't have to judge the person.